Much everyone for letting me speak this evening. I hope to be as interesting as the first two. I apologise, there might be a little bit of repetition, but hopefully it will just drive the message home about what we've been speaking about this evening. I was asked to speak about my experience of coming into the industry, which in my terms is called entering the real world. The real world, to me, is a term that we used at university, which was, to us, this elusive thing that we didn't have to worry about for 3 years. So I want to give you a little bit of an insight tonight into my experience of the UK manufacturing industry and the real world, the changing image of the businessman, and specifically focusing on the industry behind the hobbyist, which will hopefully become clear as I go on. Introductions to government initiatives to increase the interest of young people in STEM careers, which for those that are not familiar with that abbreviation, that's science, technology, engineering and mathematics, which are the 4 key subjects for coming into our industries. And an introduction of the Bloodhound Project, which then Daniel Jubb will go on to speak about in much more detail. So when I left university, actually, Steve, my dad, came up with this term of from law to lunacy, which is very much how it felt to me. I went from a very comfortable law degree. It was very difficult, but it was my familiar ground. And university life is like living in a bubble. It feels very detached from the real world, despite the fact that you're learning some very key skills for your later life and your later career. So the real world was this elusive term that myself and my university friends used to talk about the world that I now live in. And I wasn't quite prepared for just how real it would be. Despite having worked since I was 16 in part-time jobs and everything else, I thought I was preparing myself for real life, but it was somewhat different to what I was ready for. And I do very partially, blame some of that on our educational system, which some of the speakers before me have alluded to. The promised land was something that I felt that as a graduate I was entitled to. I believed, which I was told by many of the educational leaders in the higher education and university education, that leaving university would mean that I would walk out of uni straight into a management position and straight on to at least a £30,000 salary. Some would say I was quite arrogant in believing that. This is what I found when I came out. The actual world. Slightly desolate employment situation, and the actual average salary of graduates currently is £19,000 to £21,000, which I believe is actually still slightly generous. That's not to say that I think that's wrong. I've since been in employment for 2.5 years. I'm still working up to that 30,000, and I was fortunate, and I did come out into a management position, and in some circumstances wished I hadn't. I got my feet very, very wet in the first couple of years. Coming out and working for my dad wasn't an easy option. Many of you know Steve. He's not an easy option to work for. But I now understand fully why, as employers and now as an employer myself, you don't want to give young people management positions. We aren't ready for it, we aren't experienced enough for it, and we will say the wrong things at the wrong time and cause bosses some embarrassment at times about what we've said. But we are still valuable and we have our place, but I don't believe it's at the top of the chain. So I believe the educational system has something to learn from employers and from young people in employment, that the management mantra isn't correct anymore. It may have been true 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but it isn't true anymore. So I believed I was the invincible graduate. I thought I was Superwoman. I thought I deserved my place in every department. I didn't understand why people didn't quite want me in the position that I thought I was fit for, and I had a lot of learning to do. But I did have a degree, and I did have a lot of experience behind me in different ways, and I did still have my value, and I had to learn to find my place in the employment system. Just to go to a couple of statistics, which obviously some of the speakers have already alluded to, more than 1 in 3 graduates are currently in a lower skilled job than is required with your degree. So many people are working in bar jobs or retail, things that don't actually use a degree and you don't need. A number of graduate positions in employment are continuing to decline. The number of people applying for each position then continues to rise. There's currently 85 graduates fighting for every 1 place, and that's those that get to interview. The BBC reported in June that 1 in 10 new graduate leavers remain unemployed 6 months after leaving university, when you've got, slightly lower than Michael was talking about, but when you've got about £60,000 worth of debt hanging around your neck, that's quite scary. But hopefully a lot of them are comfortable living at home, but everyone is fighting to get into employment. However, 2/3 of those that are employed, so of that percentage that are employed, are in a professional sector and using their degree, but it might not be the subject that they majored in. As for myself, I did law and I work in manufacturing, so a lot of us have digressed into something different in order to find employment. So a little bit about me. I joined Stickleback 2.5 years ago after leaving uni. I graduated from the University of Reading with a 2:1 degree in law. During my time, as I said, I did work and I did try to prepare myself for the world of work. When I left university, my transition into this career came from my parents announcing they were going to build a new factory and start a new business. They very thankfully offered me the chance in order to come in and work with them and build up a new business, and they did offer me the chance of studying an MBA. I since realised how difficult that is while you work, so I'm not quite there yet, but I plan to go back. In my time in Stickleback, I think I've started to build a very reputable customer base and enjoyed month-on-month growth in the business, and it continues to be profitable and we continue to branch out. So, I wanted to do a little thank you tonight. Mark Knowlton is here from Mass. A lot of my confidence and the reason I can stand up here tonight and speak about this subject comes from Mark Knowlton. So thank you very much. I don't actually know where you are, at the back somewhere. Mass have done a fantastic job, and Mark specifically in coaching me in order to become a manager. I also had a fantastic opportunity, which many of you probably hopefully saw, when I was interviewed by the BBC News. That was great coverage, and that was all to do with young people in employment. And also EMS TV at the Southern Manufacturing Show. So my targets when I started at Stickleback were to rebrand a small business and make it graduate friendly. When I left uni, obviously I thought that every business was graduate friendly. They aren't, and as an employer I wanted to take on young people, I wanted to give young people a shot, and I did fall foul to having the slightly optimistic view. We did try to hire an apprentice. I had 32 CVs. I agreed to interview 15 of them. 10 of them confirmed their interviews. 2 turned up, and 1, as he walked through the door, said, "Well, it's 2 buses, I won't be coming here." So some of us, there is a selection of young people that damage our entire reputation. There are people out there that are really committed, really motivated, and want to work. But I appreciate, as an employer and feel for people, especially with the generation gap, that we do create some of our own bad press. We have a higher expectation than we should have, and we aren't as motivated to work. But there are those of us out there that do want to. Target 2, to increase sales. Now, all of you, I'm sure, in here in different formats have experienced that, so I won't go on about that. But number 3, create an online personality for the business. This was my hardest task. I am not a techno geek. I use a computer to answer emails. I know nothing about computers, but I'm learning. So creating an online personality, I used Facebook. Facebook doesn't necessarily work for businesses, but was introduced to many other things that do, which I'll talk about. And to find the missing link. This was a rather elusive task from my dad, but find something out there that wasn't being touched, that wasn't being worked with by the UK manufacturing sector, and I want to tell you our story about what we've now found. So the Bluebird, to many people in here and many young people, all you need to see now is a picture of a bluebird and you start to think of Twitter. And if you don't already, believe me, it will come into your life at some point. A few statistics: there are 4 million tweets sent worldwide every single day. If you go onto your Twitter account, if you have one at any one time, you will always have to refresh, even if you've only looked at it a couple of seconds ago. It is viral and it is a very useful tool. In the first quarter of 2013, 42.2 million adults used the internet, and 24 million of those visited Twitter at some point. Twitter statistics revealed that there are 12 million active users in the UK, and an active user is someone that has tweeted at least 3 times per month. It is a viral tool, but it's also a dangerous tool that has to be managed properly. It is a fantastic way of selling your business if you get it right, but it's also 24/7, so it changes your life somewhat. One of the things that I've noticed coming into the industry, for me and for many people, a business person was somebody that put on a suit and went to work every day. And if you Google the term businessman, businesswoman, these are the type of images you get, and they're the type of images that are imprinted into our head. But is it really reflective of the type of business person today? I believe not. And these are some of my customers. I very rarely go to a meeting with a prospective customer where, in this particular field that we're working in, where you're in a suit. Most people are in shorts and t-shirt, jeans and t-shirt, and these are potentially people that will be overlooked because of the stereotypes. They're valuable businessmen. Top left is a young gentleman who is 17 years old. On the day we met him, he sold £2,500 worth of his product in one day. They're incredibly innovative people that might be overlooked because of stereotypes. As well as language, as well as technology, the image of a businessman is changing. And I think it's something that we need to consider when we go out and look at how we sell our businesses and the type of customers that we look for. So how did I find these customers? We launched a new service called Ragworm. Ragworm is an online PCB portal, and it takes an innovative approach to attract a new audience. The speakers that have been coming up are wearing Proud Geek stickers, and that's our slogan, if you like. We've embraced the world of the geek. And brought it to the UK manufacturing industry. We spoke to many people, and there was a response that came back numerous times that they felt the UK electronics industry wasn't interested in them. Their orders weren't valuable. They didn't, they felt like they were going to be drawn in, sat down in a big business meeting room, forced to sign a credit application, signed up to all these different things that they weren't interested in and didn't need. They also have a different way of communicating, like we've touched on tonight. They don't necessarily want someone to pitch up at their offices at first. They don't necessarily want a phone call. They don't necessarily want a letter. What they want is to be able to go online and explore about who you are and find out what you're doing in the industry. I can't stress how important it is to have an active online profile. If your company looks dead online, you're very unlikely to attract new, young, fresh, innovative customers. Their and our belief is, if you're not doing anything online, you're not alive. That isn't true in many circumstances. There's a lot of very successful businesses that don't have an active online profile, but the younger generation that are coming up with some of these fantastic new ideas are looking for that, and they're not necessarily looking for somebody to pick up the phone to them. In fact, one of the customers I went to visit said, I actually don't want you to phone me. You take up too much time on my day, I just want to email you. So it's a slightly different culture, whereas often the face-to-face meeting is what's pushed. But having an online profile, tweeting, keeping your profile active can be incredibly attractive. I've put a number of words up on the screen, which I don't know how legible they are backwards. Probably a lot of those look alien to some of you, probably don't make a lot of sense. But there's a fantastic movement going on called the Maker Movement. And all of these are either events, publications, a style of programming, and they're all going mad. Mini Maker Fairs or Maker Fairs are a worldwide event. I've attended quite a few this year, and they are full of people doing creative things. Not all electronics, but a large majority of them are. And there are people there from 8 years old to 65, 70, but there tends to be a gap in the middle. Which is where the skills gap comes in. But there are inspiring people there, and these are all things that are going on. There's a key thing that's made this movement worldwide and global, and I don't know how many people in the room recognise the logo that's on the screen. I would probably guess there's quite a few of you that still don't know what that means. In fact, this is the Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi is a £24 computer, and it was specifically developed in order to get young people back into programming. It's since had a much bigger knock-on effect than that, but that was its beginning aim. It was launched in March 2012, and last month they hit their 1 millionth hit, sale, sorry. It's manufactured in Wales, and so it is one of our products. But it is a worldwide phenomenon, and it's only getting bigger. But the joy about what this has done is it's made electronics cool, it's made electronics accessible, and it's suddenly made it a desirable career. So what we were speaking about earlier with manufacturing and electronics perhaps being viewed as a dirty career or an undesirable career, the Raspberry Pi is changing that image, and there are code academies built around the Raspberry Pi in many primary schools now across the UK. So Ragworm, as I said, is an online buy-in PCB portal, and many of our PCBs that we make are used alongside the Raspberry Pi. Arduino, which is an open source electronics, so all of their circuit designs are online, that's what that means. We make them on panels, and they are bright orange, so it gives us a stamp within the market. What we're trying to do is change the face of PCBs a little, bring them into a colour that people want to work with, and just try and be a little bit different and make ourselves stand out. The knock-on effect of this is my job has now changed significantly. What it has meant that along my struggle of 2.5 years of trying to find exactly where I fit in an incredibly difficult, incredibly brutal industry, I feel like I've finally started to find my place. I now speak the same language as some of the people that I'm working with, and I've got a passion for it that drives my ability to sell. But I've now taken Ragworm into schools and colleges and universities. I've actually now just been invited to join the advisory board at the University of Kent Business School, and I'll be their youngest advisory supporting the manufacturing side of business. And Kent University are specifically interested in driving that into their degree better. We present and exhibit at many weekend events. So I'm lucky I'm in a position where I can trade my weekend for days off in the week sometimes. But I work many weekends up and down the country, across to Ireland, in Scotland, and it will take me across Europe and worldwide. But it changes your job. Already Ragworm is a global business, and like I was saying about Twitter, what it means is that it's 24/7. If something goes online, tweeting, people expect a response. So you have to be looking at your phone, you have to be responding to those, giving people the answers that they're waiting for. So at 10 o'clock at night, if something's tweeted, I have to be ready to respond to that. So it does change your working hours quite considerably. But I'm now involved in also many other exciting projects, which I just want to give you a quick insight into. The Bloodhound Project, which obviously you've seen around tonight, the posters and the pull-up, and obviously we've invited Daniel here tonight, which we're incredibly privileged to have him with us. For those of you who aren't aware, the Bloodhound Project was developed by Sir Richard Noble, and it was developed to break the world land speed record and to drive at 1,000 miles per hour across the South African desert. But it was also developed with a much bigger ethos behind it, which was to get science, technology, engineering and maths back into schools, develop the curriculum and look at the jobs that are available. The electronics market and the manufacturing and everything around that is a fantastic market, and I think there's many believers in the fact that it will drive the economy growth, it will be our next generation. And this car and the program behind it was developed in order to do that. And it's also since driven many other things and given inspiration to teachers in order to how they can change their mantra and their curriculum in order to suit the jobs that are available. Just to give you a better picture of the car, it gives you a little idea of the size, but believe me, when you stand next to it, it's a much bigger beast than it appears. But why is that important? Obviously, we've covered some of that tonight, but we aren't pushing people into jobs that don't exist, which I think is incredibly important. You know, it's great to go and do a law degree, to do a finance degree, things like that, but there aren't as many jobs. Our industry is crying out for them, so we need to change our curriculum in order to push people into the right directions and guide them into careers, but also well-paying careers. The Guardian rated our careers as the second highest earners in the country, which is quite inspirational for young people. There is still a focus on money. But they also, like I said, believe that it could create the much needed growth in Europe that we're all kind of looking out for. Thank you very much for listening. If there are any questions, I'm willing to answer any, but thank you for having me to speak this evening. Good, I can sit and drink. Oh, damn it. I thought I got away with getting back to the wine.
I hear what you're saying, Stacey.
I think I got some of it. I'm going to answer it. It might not be the right answer, but I'll give it a go. In my local community, which I can only sort of speak for locally, I wish I could do the whole country, but I'm probably not. I'm not the superwoman I thought I was. As a group, we've kind of taken a different approach. We've approached it from the lower people in council upwards. We've just had a great accomplishment where we've managed to get Kent to sign up to 18 months of the Bloodhound Project in order to deliver it into schools, colleges, universities. And schools includes primary and secondary. And that will touch somewhere around 100,000 pupils over the 18 months. It's an 18-month-long project. I am very aware of the fact of the backing for young people and the grants. We're quite fortunate in Kent and Medway that there are a lot of start-up grants. There are a lot of grants in order to get people off the ground. We've got a thing called the Tiger Fund at the moment, which is around about £3 million worth of grants in order to get people offices, capital funding, which is all specifically aimed at job creation. So probably live in a slightly fortunate geographical area of the country where that's very much coming through. Political-wise, not really my bag, but there is a definite change in government starting to happen where they are starting to listen to the regional councils. And the more people that are pushing it and the more initiatives that are coming through that people, especially business people, are pushing and backing, the more government will sit up and listen. So my approach is slightly different. I tend to go from the bottom upwards with councils. It's very difficult to get time with MPs, but if you've got the councillors on side and the lead councillors that control the budget buying into the projects that are being delivered, the MPs start to sit up and listen, and they then start to attend the meetings and start to back what you're doing, which will then drive it further up into government.